Good morning, everyone. If I could have your attention. If you can hear my voice, clap. There we go. Good morning. My name is Jeremy Dennis. I am your town manager. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and some new ones too. So thanks for coming out on what I'm sure is a busy Saturday morning for you. It's my pleasure to introduce Council Member Mary Ann Derwin, who's going to speak on behalf of the council.
Welcome. Welcome to our continued conversation about housing in Portola Valley, our third in a series. As Jeremy said, I'm Mary Ann Derwin. I have been on the town council for 13 and a half years, and I have been working in housing for about 7 or 8 years in both town and the county. I'd also like to introduce my colleagues who are here. Council Member John Richards and Vice Mayor Jeff Elfs. And as Jeremy said, thank you for coming out. This is a way bigger crowd than I would have anticipated on a lovely June 1st morning. And I also want to thank those of you, and I see many of you, who have attended one or both of our community conversations last year. The purpose of today's meeting is to bring all of you back together and to talk about the number one topic in the council chambers all throughout the Bay Area and in the state legislature, the lack of affordable housing and how we're going to solve it. And to update you on what the town's been doing since we last met last year. This is your opportunity to ask questions and share concerns, ideas, fears, all of it. Bring it all. We need to hear all of it. For those of you who are here for the first time, this is a very different format from our council meetings. First, you're seated at tables in small groups with a facilitator who will keep the conversation going and take notes. And second, because we as council members are only listeners, we are not participants. It is a rare opportunity to be with politicians who are not allowed to talk. You will see us roaming around, but we will not participate. This is your meeting. This is you driving it. Since we realize that not everyone could come this morning, we are filming live on Penn TV, and that would be accessible on their website, which is Penn, capital P-E-N, capital TV.tv/live. I think we also have the link on our website. Do we, Jeremy?
On YouTube, there will be a tape of this on the website later.
So you will be able to see it, and those of you who have friends who couldn't come can see it. And with that, I would like to hand over the floor to Pat, excuse me, Pat Brown, our lead facilitator from Home for All.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'll add my welcome to you, and thank you for coming out on this beautiful morning to this beautiful facility. As Mary Ann said, I am with Home for All. I am help with the design and the implementation of these meetings around the county, and I'm here today to serve as the lead facilitator, which means I'm the one that kind of keeps track of time and makes sure that things are moving along as we have planned them for the morning, and that you have plenty of time to have your conversations at the tables. I would like to introduce and thank the table facilitators who are here from Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center. I'd ask them to raise their hands so everybody at their table knows who their facilitator is. Their role is the same as mine, to help you at your tables to have productive, involved, engaged conversations as we go through the morning. So we're really happy that they're here, and they are true partners in this process. So I'm going to ask Jessica Mullen, who is the manager of the Home for All project with the county, to give you a brief, some information about what Home for All is and why we're here helping the town of Portola Valley have this conversation.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning. As Pat mentioned, I think we have a slide. Here we go. My name is Jessica Stanfield-Mullen. I'm the program manager for our Home for All San Mateo County initiative. And Home for All is a community collaborative addressing the housing challenge in San Mateo County by promoting preservation and production of all housing types for all ages. We work together with all of the jurisdictions in the county, along with school districts, transportation agencies, faith community, housing advocates, for-profit and nonprofit developers, just small and large employers, just bringing everybody to the table to find innovative approaches and creative solutions that we could do here locally in San Mateo County to address our housing challenge. The initiative was born out of our Jobs Housing Gap Task Force, which was convened in 2015. And the goal of Home for All is to really close our jobs housing gap. When we first started this work, we looked at what that jobs housing gap was. And in 2014, for every 1 unit of housing that we were building, we were creating 24 jobs. We've been able to close that gap since close that gap down to 12 to 1 as of 2017. So for every 1 unit of housing, we are adding 12 additional jobs. Some of that is due to the decline in the growth of our jobs, but it's also attributed to a lot of the housing that has been coming online throughout the jurisdictions here in San Mateo County. Our approach through Home for All is really three-pronged. It's looking at educating, innovating, and convening. So for education, we have our Home for All website. There's a lot of information about the housing challenge on there. There's our action plan, our events page, and our housing toolkit, which really showcases a wide variety of housing options that jurisdictions can consider. There's a lot of information about what those different options are. There's links to best practices and resources. And these options range from things like shared housing to second units, impact fees, affordable housing funds, to multi-generational housing in the downtowns and along the transit corridors. It really serves to be a resource for communities looking at ways that they can address the housing challenge and what best works for their community. We know that all of our communities are different, and some housing options work better than others, and we just want to provide those resources. The second way is through innovating. We have our second unit online second unit center materials that are at your resource table. These are things that we created because we know residents are interested in looking at building second units. We think it's a great way to utilize our existing housing stock. If you go online, it really spells out the steps from concept and design, through permitting, through construction, to occupancy. We have a cost calculator on there so you can sort of estimate out what your costs are and identifies your return on investment. And the third way in which we're working is convening, bringing folks together. Through Home for All, we host a lot of convenings and workshops to really talk about best practices, talk about innovative solutions for our jurisdictions and our community partners to consider, learn how these things work, learn where there's challenges or barriers to each of these ideas. And the thing that we're really most excited about, and the reason why we're here today, is through our community engagement program. We're working with 9 jurisdictions. We worked with 4 jurisdictions last year. Portola Valley was one of the first cities that we worked with. We're working with 5 this year. And what we wanted to do through Home for All is support jurisdictions that were interested in broadening the conversation about housing in their community, bringing community members together at the table, and talking about what creative solutions the communities could do to be able to consider housing moving forward. We provide a lot of support. We help out with a lot of the meeting logistics, looking at meeting design, and then working with folks to help doing the facilitation here at the tables. So that's our role here today, is to sort of help support this effort that the city is committed to doing, since they did 2 last year, and we were really encouraged to hear that they wanted to come back and do another one this year. And we're really here to help support that effort and bring all of you here this morning. So we really appreciate that you're giving up a Saturday morning to come here, especially when it's particularly beautiful outside, to talk about what are some options for your town in terms of housing. And we just want to thank you for being here today.
I understand that there are some community members who have not found seats at tables, and if we can ask you to please find a table that has a little space for you and join in, because that's where the real conversations will be taking place. So please do that. We've introduced ourselves. Now it's at the time for you, the most important people who are here this morning, to introduce yourselves at the table. So your table facilitator is going to lead you in a round of introductions at your table. We have about 5 minutes to do this. There is not a time in the agenda except at your table. You're very welcome to bring that in at your table, and you have also brought it in at the moment.
Thank you, Meg.
Noted, and will be recorded. So again, I'm going to ask if we can turn to the table facilitators and please lead introductions at your tables.
Just over there.
Oh. Okay.
Who's in the room?
The next.
This one?
Yeah.
Where do you want to be? This one?
Yes. Okay, we'll be wrapping up the introductions in about a minute.
How are we doing on time?
We're going to catch up.
Yep.
Okay, if I could have your attention back up to the front of the room. Thank you so much for the introductions and keeping them brief. You'll have much more time to talk with each other in just a few minutes. So what we'd like to do now is you found out who's at your table. We'd like to find out who's in the room with us this morning. So we have an exercise, a little calisthenics for you this morning. And so it's called Stand If. So I'm going to describe something, and if it fits you, you're going to stand up, and then you're going to sit down again, and I have several questions like that. So we'll just get a sense of who is here this morning. So, if you have lived in Portola Valley less than 5 years, would you please stand? Welcome. Okay. If you have lived in Portola Valley 5 to 15 years, please stand. Good. Welcome to you as well. Okay, those that have lived here longer than 15 years. Okay, we can see that there are longtime residents with us as well as newcomers, and we're happy to have both of you. If you participated in one or both of the community conversations in Portola Valley that were held last year, could you please stand? Okay, so we have some newcomers to this format. We hope you will find it a welcoming and inviting format. The whole idea of using the table facilitators is to make sure that everybody here has the opportunity to engage with the information that we're presenting. So we're happy to have you here. Who thinks Portola Valley is a great place to live? Stand if you do. Okay, last question. Who's ready to get on with the morning's activities? Stan. Okay. Okay, we'll do that. So we have already gone over. Okay. Thank you. I have a helper. We've already gone over kind of the format for the morning. There will be a presentation and time for discussion, another presentation and time for discussion. So we break up the morning that way and try to give you as much time as possible to sort of work through the information that's been provided. Your facilitators are there to help you have that conversation, and also they'll be taking some notes. We'll be compiling at the end of the meeting notes from a number of different sources. One thing I wanted to point out to you is in front of you, you have something called a participant feedback form. That's a very good opportunity for you to make sure that any suggestions or ideas or questions that you have to be captured from this morning are really captured and compiled and presented back to the town of Portola Valley. So please make good use of those forms. One other thing before we get started is that we would like to use some conversation guidelines this morning. Are they up there? Okay, so they're also on your table. So we're going to ask those of you that are here participating to speak from your own experience, to really share what your experience around these topics is. We ask you to listen to others so that you can understand what they have to say. We expect that there will be different points of view, and we encourage that, invite that. We also ask that you respect different points of view as they're presented at your table. We ask everyone to participate because we value input from everyone. And remember that questions are valuable. So if you want to find out a little bit more about what somebody at your table has to say, raise a question and help them explain it a little bit more. So are you okay with those guidelines? Okay. Let's go on then. Did you have... Let me go back. We have one more thing before we're going to start the presentation. We're going to have a listening exercise. So the listening exercise is asking you to find a person at your table that you do not know well. And we're going to ask you to have a conversation with that person that is one person listening and one person talking at a time, and then we're going to trade roles. So there'll be a talker and a listener in the second half of the exercise. It's a 90-second exercise for one person, 90-second for the second person, and I'll keep time on that. So if you can find someone that you don't know well and engage in this conversation, we ask that the person you share whose birthday is the next birthday, what month, and that person will be the first listener, okay? So these are the questions that you'll be talking about, and you can get started now.
Sorry, Pat. I didn't mean to take it from you. I just thought the slides were there.
I'm not ready, so
Don't be sorry. I was trying to get to you before.
I asked if somebody was going to be there. I know this is not right. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. What I also need is a timekeeper. Get my phone to do it. This 90-second thing. It is and it isn't, yeah. Okay. Can I have your attention back? Believe it or not, 90 seconds have passed, and it's time to switch roles. When you hear the bell, you know that the 90 seconds has gone. So thank you for doing that exercise. This is just a little warm-up to get you ready for the conversations at your table. So as soon as I fix my clock here. Sorry, I couldn't get it to turn off. It is now time to introduce your town manager, Jeremy Dennis, and he's going to come up and share some information with you. Please listen carefully to him because you will be talking about this information at your tables at the end of the presentation.
Hello again. Someone said hi to me. That was nice. Hi back. I think that was Lucy. Hi, Lucy. So it's my pleasure today to present elements of the housing strategic plan, the goals and the values. There we go. Whoops. Now it's not working. So for those of you who don't know what the housing strategic plan is, it was adopted by the council in late 2016, and it laid out a series of Portola Valley-centric problems related to housing. Here they're listed as values and principles. Really, it was about addressing what the council understood to be three housing challenges. Seniors aging in place that did not have an opportunity to continue to live here if they moved out of their homes. Multiple generations of families staying in and returning to town, so those who grew up here don't have an opportunity to move back unless it's in with some of you. Or those employees who support vital town services, whether it's people who work for me, fire, sheriffs, and others. So that was adopted, as I said, in 2016. And it was also adopted in conjunction with the council priority setting process. So every year the council meets around budget time to discuss the issues that they'd like the staff to focus on. And over the last 4 years of that cycle, housing has been at the top of the list. So subsequently to the adoption of the plan, the council started these conversations. It was good to see some of you had made the two last year. At the first conversation, council essentially asked, is this your sense, residents and community? Are these the issues that you believe are occurring in town? And what we heard back at that meeting was that yes, that people had stories about their own families who had issues, or employees that they cared about who had issues. You certainly heard that story for me. We lost our finance director 2 years ago. She was commuting 2 hours one way. She moved to Las Vegas. We've lost principals and teachers. So that was the story that we heard back, resonated with what we understood was happening in the community. So it's important to note that there is a regional connection to the issues here. And while the housing strategic plan is looking for Portola Valley solutions to the Portola Valley problems, we don't live in a vacuum. And the issues that are happening in the region are affecting housing issues in town. So I'm going to go through a couple slides fairly quickly, but you can see here what's happened. Considerable amount of jobs have been added with very few housing units. The housing prices have doubled, more than that in a moment. I'm sorry? Do we know how that 12-to-1 ratio compares to other areas? It's very similar. We're at the high end of it, but all Bay Area counties are experiencing similar sorts of issues related to that. Thanks, Dave. So here's just a slide on through 2016 on how housing prices have changed to both homes, single-family homes, and condominiums, so considerable change. Rents have exploded in San Mateo County. This slide demonstrates how much income one would need to rent or purchase certain housing stock. And as you can see, it's a considerable amount of money to enter into either a rental situation or a ownership situation. And as a result, only 24% of first-time homebuyers can actually afford an entry-level home. You can see here in the context of the Bay Area, California, United States. thought this slide was important to show. This shows either a type of job or a typical wage for different, different jobs, and the relationship it would have to rent, and it's obviously a huge delta between what you would need and what the jobs pay. As you can see here, as a result of that, most of the people who work in San Mateo County are commuting from other places. This slide shows since the data that we had, 2016, the changes both in single-family and condominium prices. They continue to increase. And because of these issues, the state has begun to have conversations around housing-related bills, and they have gotten fairly concerning. I wanted to first talk about this regional housing needs assessment. You may have seen in the paper recently, the town met its RHNA numbers, and I want to put that in some level of context. RHNA is a requirement through our 8-year cycle housing element. We're required to have a housing element that plans for different levels of housing stock. And over that 8-year cycle, we need to demonstrate that those houses are being built. We're not required to build them, though. We're required to plan for them through our zoning. So there's a bit of a disconnect, as you can see already. The state. There are no penalties at this time. We are seeing, though, in the most egregious cases we've seen in Huntington Beach, their city got sued over some zoning issues related to RHNA. And our anticipation in talking to our state legislatures is that there will be more sticks than carrots coming down the road on the RHNA side. So we met our numbers. 64 units were required over an 8-year period for below median levels of housing stock. We're at 69. The council has publicly stated that they see this as a minimum, and that meeting the minimum is not solving or really even addressing housing issues in Portola Valley. So I did want to mention that. What is the 8-year period? It was 2014 was the first year through 2022. So we're about, from the perspective of meeting the RHNA numbers, yes. The 8-year cycle has that amount. Is correct that the numbers that get built over don't count to future cycles.
Who establishes the goal?
The state. If there are questions, it would be helpful instead of, because we have a tight time frame, to vet those at the tables, and we're happy to come around and answer them for you. Thank you. Meg, please. Meg, thank you. The other element is state legislation. So as you may have read in the paper, SB 50 was a piece of legislation authored by Senator Scott Wiener. Among other things, he had two elements that we believed would affect us. One was a change in the base zoning that would change an R1 zoning district, which is a single-family residence zoning district, to an R4. The second element was additional requirements in job-rich areas, which was ill-defined in the bill. It was actually something that was going to be defined by the Housing and Community Development Department at the state. That bill's actually on hiatus right now, fortunately. We had indicated through our legislators our concern over that bill. There are other bills that we're anticipating coming through in the next couple of years that will further assign to us different housing issues. Our hope has been that if we can demonstrate that we're participating in a housing process, that we have a seat at the table instead of having something imposed on us. But state legislation continues to be a concern. So coming back to Portola Valley, the census data has been quite fascinating. It actually showed a decrease in the number of people who lived in town over that 40-year period you can see there. We're also seeing a huge decrease in the number of people per household, almost a quarter. When we reviewed our last official traffic counts, which were 2015, we're doing more later this year, we were surprised to find that more cars come into town than leave town during what we would call peak commute hours. That tells us there are many people working in town, we suspect, both in the businesses you're familiar with, but also to your homes, to the homes of your neighbors. And we understand that as the lifestyle changes here, that there may be an increased need for that kind of service to come into town, which increases traffic. So the plan has focused on 3 different programs, if you will. One is the accessory dwelling unit or second unit program, which I hope many of you are familiar with, and there'll be more detail on that in a bit. The affiliated housing program, that's part of our housing element. That program has identified 3 institutions in town, Stanford University, the Priory, and the Sequoias, for multifamily housing opportunities outside our code. We don't allow in the regular code anything other than single-family residences, but those 3 institutions have the opportunity to build outside of code. The Priory has built housing for its teachers' employees, and you've heard about some other things going on that will be talked about later. And then the third piece is town-owned land. As you know, the town owns property in the community. There was a committee that was set up to look at any opportunity on that land. The committee has been focusing on a few properties, but there have been no recommendations from the committee yet. The concept behind this work is that the cost of land is so astronomical that owning the land gives you at least a better base to do something, putting the money that the town has in its funds towards construction. So those are the 3 tools that have been used within the plan so far. And again, we'll talk about that in a moment. I'll turn it back to you for the first question. Thank you.
Jeremy, the PowerPoint will be available on the website.
Yes.
So I saw some of you trying to take notes quickly, but this information will all be available to you on the website, so you can go back and look at it if you'd like. I'd also like to repeat the suggestion that if there are questions that you have about the information that's provided, please note them on your participant feedback sheet and we'll be able to respond to them. As the discussions are going on, if there is a burning question at your table, facilitators, please raise your hand and we'll try to get a resource person to the table to answer that burning question. So we're ready now to go to the table conversations that we're here to have this morning. So we have about 15 minutes, and there are 3 questions that you'll be asked to address. So I'm going to turn it back to the table facilitators. Okay, table facilitators, 5 more minutes before we end. Okay, we're going to need to wrap up the first conversation. If I could have your attention back. If you did not get a chance to say something out loud that you want captured and compiled into information, please write it. Could I have your attention, please? If you still have something to say in that first discussion, write it down on your participant feedback form. We'd like to now just ask for 4 or 5 nuggets of information that surfaced in your conversation. We'll take comments from 4 or 5 tables. So table facilitators that would like to share something from your table, please raise your hand, and Denise will be around with the microphone.
So our table shared a lot of comments about the ADU ordinance. In general, people were very supportive of ADUs, but there was a concern about how the fact that the way the ordinance was implemented didn't exactly meet people's ideas. People felt like it would end up splitting properties into multi-family parcels and may not end up meeting the intent of the ADU ordinance to create affordable housing for folks.
Thank you. Another table facilitator? Okay.
This table also had a lot of questions and concerns about the ADUs, especially sort of minimum. There's talk of minimum. There's more definition needed around minimum lot size for ADUs and just fleshing out details in general. A lot of concern about plans that have been put in place 20 some odd years ago around scenic corridors and sort of the character of the community that don't look like they've been that they're part of the discussion on the strategic planning that they're seeing in front of them.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, there were a number of what is seemingly small items, but I think they're worth listening to, especially the town administrative people. First of all, more people would like to have an opportunity to assist in this whole process. People who have just come here and discovered what's going on, they want to find a way that they be invited to assist more deeply and more regularly. We had a request, because I for one don't know it exists, for a working person housing plan. In other words, we talked about more housing for, say, the people who are employed here, but so far there's no understanding that such a plan exists so that it can be followed up with execution. Then another one is, and this seems to happen all over, not just Portola Valley, but evidently there are some who feel in Portola Valley it's particularly dire, and that is a very elongated process to get approvals of applications to build. And that's something that we might want to find out more about.
One more. Over here.
Regarding the housing strategic plan, one question was how will town finance building on town-owned land? And what town-owned land will be built on? A comment was made that much of the town-owned land was put aside as an open space. Is that the land that will be built on, or what land will be built on? Regarding the goals of the housing strategic plan, there was some discussion. Are these the best goals to really alleviate this gap between the growth of jobs and the growth versus the growth of housing? And given these goals, is the housing strategic plan the smartest strategy? There was also a comment that some people object to the goal of having adult children living in town.
Okay. There, I am positive that there were interesting conversations at other tables, but in the interest of time and giving you enough time to have the second conversation, we're going to move on. I just want to assure you that all of the notes will be captured, will be compiled, and you will see them in a report after this meeting. A report will be circulated back to you. So now it's time to go to the second presentation that we have planned for this morning, and we have your Planning and Building Director, Laura Russell, who's going to make that presentation.
Thank you, Pat. Good morning, everyone. I'm Laura Russell, Planning and Building Director. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you this morning. So we're going to talk a little bit now about implementation of the Housing Strategic Plan. Let me just get the clicker. Okay. We're going to turn up the volume a little bit here. Sorry, it's a little temperamental. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is ADUs, accessory dwelling units, also known as second units. And so we talked about this a little bit earlier, but this is a little bit more detail about what's been happening around ADUs in the last year or a year and a half. And so we've talked about there were 2 previous meetings that were held here, similar meetings to this in this room, in March and May of 2018. The first one was very general in nature. It talked about the housing crisis in general, how people were experiencing it, and it gave a chance for residents to express general ideas about how that might be addressed. ADUs really rose to the surface of that conversation, and there was a lot of interest in facilitating ADUs and using that as a way to meet some of the housing strategic plan goals. So the second meeting, which was held in May of 2018, was focused was focused specifically on ADUs, and a lot of ideas came out from residents about that. Then the town council held a study session in July of 2018, where they went through all of those ideas and new ideas that were brought by staff and other residents that had contributed along the way, and filtered some of those ideas and prioritized them, and then said, okay, Planning Commission, now let's work on that ADU ordinance. And then we had a great little ADU tour. It was very successful. We had residents throughout town that opened up their properties. 3 ADUs were on tour, and residents were able to come and visit those 3 different ADUs of different sizes and different configurations to help imagine how ADUs might be successful in the community. Then the Planning Commission undertook a lot of work. There was a series of meetings, 12 public meetings overall between the Planning Commission, ASCC, and Town Council. Very extensive discussion by the Planning Commission about what the new ADU ordinance should include. And then the Town Council took final action on that, and it went into effect in April just now of 2019. We're just getting our first and second applications are coming in right now. So the highlights of that new ADU ordinance, it encourages the creation of ADUs. Some ADUs are subject to a more streamlined review now than they used to be before, so some of them might get approved more quickly. It allows ADUs on most properties in town. We used to have a limit of 1 acre, and now as long as you meet some fire safety criteria, you're able to build ADUs on most properties in the community if you have available floor area left in your property. And then in some situations, people will be able to build bigger ADUs. More cases, people will be able to build up to 1,200 square feet. And internal conversions, where people are converting a part of their existing property, then you can build a little bit bigger ADU than that because there's not as many impacts on the community. And so those are some of the highlights of the ADU ordinance. It also allows separate utilities and separate addresses, so some ADUs may be easier to rent moving forward. And then some details about the affiliated housing program that we've been talking about. The housing element of the general plan says that the town should reach out to our affiliated housing partners and encourage them to build units on their properties. So the town has been systematically reaching out to those partners over the last few years, and we've seen as the housing crisis has gotten worse, those partners have been more interested in moving forward with projects. So specifically, as you know now, the 3 affiliated housing partners that are currently in the program are the Priory School, Stanford, with their property that is commonly known as the Wedge, and the Sequoias. So specifically, Priory has an approved master plan. They have an approval existing right now for 13 units of faculty and staff housing. They have a current application that is in right now for 6 of those units. It's a 2-story building. You might have seen the story poles as you drive by. So those are the flags that show where the building outline would be. So those story poles are up right now. The Priory has done outreach to the community, and we anticipate that that project is going to go forward for consideration by the ASCC this summer. And then next, in regards to Stanford, they have been working on very conceptual plans for this property. They came before the town council earlier this year with a very early conceptual idea of how the project might be developed, and the council gave them feedback to go out into the community and conduct community outreach. So far, they've held 2 community outreach meetings, and we're expecting them to conduct more this summer. And then based on the information we have now, we are anticipating that they would make an application perhaps in fall of this year. If that application is made, then we would start the formal review and analysis of that project. So that would include things like a full environmental review under CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, analysis by staff, numerous community meetings, outreach, information on the town website. So that process hasn't started yet, but when it does, there'll be a lot of information available to the public and a lot of opportunity to provide comments on that project. And then turning to the Sequoias, you're familiar with this location. It's number 3 on the map, just in case. And the Sequoias team and their architect met with the town team, including the mayor and staff, and we had a conversation with them about what some potential options might be. And so they have let us know that their architect is working on a feasibility study right now and considering some different locations on their property where they may be able to build some housing units for their employees and staff. So not more senior housing units for their residents, but specifically for their employees and staff members. So we've been talking about how the housing situation has gotten worse in the community as well as in the region. And as that's been happening, we've heard from other local institutions and businesses that they may be interested in joining the town-affiliated housing program. And so the council has formed a subcommittee to consider this. They've just started this work. And so the idea is to potentially include additional partners in the community. And so those folks may be able to build some housing on their properties in order to accommodate some of their employees and staff. So this conversation is just getting going, and any changes would have to go through a planning commission review and public meetings, as well as council review. So if something like that is undertaken, we're kind of at the beginning of that process and that conversation. I don't know if I have the specifics right now, but if you want to reflect that question, then we'll go back into our records when we publish the answers for today and give you as much information as we can. That's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. I know that some of the churches have expressed some preliminary interest, and I think the fire district may also be interested in doing something. But we'll see if we can get you a specific answer.
I know we're supposed to not ask questions, but are you legally allowed to rent only? And they have to be rental, it seems to me. Rent or to your own employees, and can you restrict to not allowing outsiders to come in?
Right now, the way that the program is structured, it's for the employees that are associated with that institution.
That's legal.
Yes, that is legal. Yes. So in general, there's a concept called fair housing that does put some limitations on the way that you can make housing available for people. But yes, the existing program is legal, and we would be very mindful of fair housing laws moving forward with any new partners or with any potential changes to the program. So if there's other questions, please get them into your table feedback form, and we'll make sure we get more answers and more details out to you. Okay, now town-owned property. I know that there's a lot of interest in this topic here this morning. As a little bit more background, Jeremy talked a little bit about the ad hoc committee was formed in 2016 and conducted meetings in 2017 and 2018. And they considered all of the town-owned parcels that maybe could have development potential. So they systematically went through them and looked at the size of them, legal constraints, physical limitations, those kinds of things, and made a big list and a map to figure out if any of those parcels could potentially be developed for housing in the future. And so there's 2 parcels that rose to the top of that conversation. The first one is the road remnant on Alpine Road. So it's shown here. It's sort of a crescent-shaped parcel. It's next to Corte Madera School. It's about 1.3 acres in size. And this is a leftover parcel from when that road alignment was done. And so that's how this parcel came into being when they changed the location of the road. So that's why we call it a road remnant. So you can see Alpine Road swings around the outside of that in the crescent shape. Yeah, the frog pond is off to the side of this location, but I I hear the questions and concerns, and we'll ask you to get those reflected into the table discussion. We understand that a lot more information on this is going to be needed as we move forward, and we know that there's going to be a lot of questions about this, so we're very happy to receive those this morning in your groups. The second location that the ad hoc committee considered is the substation at Town Center. So you may not have really even registered that this building is there. It's a maintenance facility in the sheriff's substation. It's also the bathrooms next to the field. Maybe that's how a lot of folks know about it. But the idea is that there may be potential to add a couple of units at this location. As you can see here, it's set far back from Portola Road behind the tennis courts. And so this is the location that has the potential for units because of its okay in terms of seismic safety and already, town-owned property. So not a lot of units possible here, but it is a potential location. Tricky clicker this morning. We also wanted to share another element of the Housing Strategic Plan that is a tool that is county-wide, that is a really successful tool. And this is the HIP Housing, is an organization that's been in San Mateo County since 1979, and they run a home sharing program. And the idea of this is that people who have space in their homes to rent out can work with HIP Housing in order to find a renter that would be a good fit for them. So they check people's references and backgrounds, and they make people connections so that they'll have a good fit. And so this has been very successful, especially for seniors that have a little bit of space. It's also a way to figure out, hey, is it a good idea for me to share some space with a relatively low risk, since HIP does all of the matching. There's also an opportunity for folks to have some services in exchange for reduced rent. So this may be helpful for some residents as well. And we do have flyers from HIP in the back of the room. Arlie's holding it up. So if anyone is interested in home sharing, we'd be happy to provide those to you. And the HIP staff is really great to work with if that's something you or your neighbors are interested in considering. This is home sharing, we think, is a good option for this community and is one of the priorities in our housing element as well as in our housing strategic plan. And next, just a little bit about public outreach, and I would call it community connections. I mentioned the ADU tour, which was held in October of 2018, which was really successful. And I think there was a very good takeaway from that experience, which is this community really shines and is very successful when there's neighbor-to-neighbor programs, and staff can be in a facilitating role to those programs. So in that ADU tour example, people opened up their properties, let people come in to their ADUs and see them and talk to them and think it through for themselves. And I think it helped decision-making in the ADU process and help people who are interested in building ADUs in the future. So we'd like to build on some of that success and hold another ADU tour this year. And we've also been thinking about other types of resources that we can facilitate neighbors working together to share information. So things like an ADU picture book with pictures and examples of plans of what people have done with their ADUs, as well as maybe a directory of ADU owners. So if you're interested in building an ADU, maybe another resident would be willing to send you some emails or have a phone call and talk about what it took for them to build their ADUs. So that is the conclusion of the discussion from us around Housing Strategic Plan implementation. And so I'll turn it back over to Pat.
Thank you, Laura. Now it's time for you to have your discussion at your tables. We have 2 questions for you. Where do we aim? There we are. So I'll turn it back to the table facilitators. You have until 10 minutes to 12 for this conversation, so you have a reasonable amount of time to have it. So please get started. If you have a burning question that needs to be answered at your table, please have the facilitator raise your hand, and we'll try to have a resource come around. Thank you.
it makes more sense to build on town property than taking some of the properties that add to the charm of Portola Valley, the 100 scenic corridor. Taking that away. Less costly. I think that would be a bit on top of this because Stanford went down and this Stanford also, right? So I think that was Stanford that is on the corridor. Oh, I see. You want to Portola Valley 100 corridor, which people around here are correct. Portola Valley and the land is there. Yeah. So build on town property.
Politicians are shifting that way, and I think it's inevitable. So I think it's really important that a town like this is gathering and facilitating these meetings, giving people's input. Because otherwise, if we don't all come up with our own plans that everybody can agree on, then it's going to come from the top down, and that's not what we want. So I think this is really important.
Yeah, so here you say part of the reason is that you want to count and want to density. Do you have any specific reaction to what you heard from the strategy?
I think the challenge is always how do you preserve the quality of life that we're talking about, and yet how do you accommodate, the need for people to change their homes or its employees to get the resources they need to live independently. So that's help lawns, help with caregiving, help with, we are looking at ways to carpool. We're looking at ways that people can come in and not have multiple cars. We're also looking at what areas on our 42 acres can we add a unit or two or four or six, so that employees don't have to drive that far. But these are all just ideas. We haven't gotten to the point where there's plans in place. So I like the idea that the alternative dwelling unit, of course, there's issues they can do like that. has to be worked out. I like the idea of, looking at land that's already owned that isn't being used for something else. So but they're all really challenging issues that I think we should point out.
We have 5 minutes left. Time flies when you're having a good conversation. Thank you very much for getting involved and working on those questions. One more reminder that if you have something that didn't get resolved or you didn't get a chance to say, please put that on your feedback form. I'm also going to direct your attention on the back of the form. There is a meeting evaluation form. Even if you didn't write anything else on your form, we'd love to have feedback from you about how this meeting worked for you. So while you're doing that, I'm going to ask Jeremy to come up to the front and please talk to you about the next steps that will be happening.
Thank you, Pat. I hope everyone's had an exciting conversation today with your neighbors and new friends. So just a few things that I wanted to mention. So first of all, we are often told in our business that I didn't know about what you're doing. And it's something that we care about immensely. It's also can be candidly frustrating for us because we do a lot to make sure information is available to residents should they wish to find it. In particular with housing, there are multiple ways to find out about what the town is working on. So this is one way. You could subscribe to our e-notices. It's on the front page of our website and click on housing. You can also see there's many other ways or many other items that you can learn about. This is not the only way we promote the information about what's happening in town. We do use Nextdoor. We use the forum. On very large items, we will mail you something. I assume a lot of you got that. And other ways. So please take advantage of that. Unfortunately, we cannot beam the information into your brains. We need you to reach out and make a proactive decision to be engaged with us. And please let your neighbors know that's the case as well. If they're saying, I didn't know, please tell them, oh, there's ways to know. Another way to know, there's flyers in the back. We have an app called PV Connect. This is a way to tell us about what's happening on your street. If you see something that's concerning, a pothole, a code enforcement action, you want to know what's happening in town, this app can be downloaded. There's flyers in the back, but look for PV Connect on Android or Apple. I sound like a commercial there. Moving forward, as you heard from Laura and I, there's a lot that is being discussed just to allay any concerns or fears, particularly related to the two affiliated housing, the affiliated housing project at Stanford. Nothing has been proposed. There is no application, so there's time for continued participation. On town-owned property, the committee is active, but they have not made a recommendation to the council. So there's time for you to participate. We are scheduling another meeting for that body soon. So the purpose of a meeting like this is to bring people in as early as possible in the process. And it's good to see so many people here. So I really want people to make sure that that's one of the takeaways, that there's nothing baked, there's nothing that's been decided. And there's plenty. Do we have a date for the July meetings for Stanford? We'll get it out as soon as it's formalized, Christy. Thank you. And as always, I'm available, Laura's available, Arlie Cassidy, who's many of you know from our planning department, who helped put this together today, brought the food. Thank you, Arlie. She made sure there was extra coffee so you'd stay caffeinated, so I'm sure you appreciate that. We are always available to answer any questions that you have, and as well as the council. The staff's here to facilitate these discussions. We don't have an opinion on these matters. We're here to make sure that you have the best information and that we create transparent processes that people can participate in. So that's why we're here. And with that, I'd like to introduce the council up, and I think they just wanted to wave and say hello. They're looking at me, maybe they didn't want to do that, but I'm going to put them on the spot anyway. Marianne.
I want to thank you all for coming and sharing your concerns. I mean, I heard a lot of concerns. This is really, really hard stuff. We're trying to balance our historical values, our belief in protecting the environment and our open spaces and our way of life with what's become, in my opinion, a humanitarian crisis through the housing disaster. And we're also looking at Sacramento sending some very draconian laws down our way. This is a very lot to balance. And I know it's difficult, and I know a lot of you are unhappy, but we're really going to try to do the best we can for you. And again, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Marianne. The last thing we're going to do today is ask your table facilitators to lead you in just a round to tell us in 2 or 3 words how you're feeling as you're leaving this meeting today. When you have done that, you are free to go. So I'll turn it back to the table facilitators.